This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jespersen.
I want to welcome you to this episode of Real Talk. Coming up in just a second, the Reverend Michael Coren. Always love when he can join us, and he's got a new book out, Heaping Coals, and he's never afraid to just plunge into the deep end of conversations that matter and to ruffle a few feathers. And he's got a fascinating personal journey as well. I mean, even the book title itself, From Media Firebrand to Anglican Priest. Michael Coren coming up with, I'm sure, maybe, Johnny, a little bit of political commentary as well. We can't help ourselves, and we'll see what the good Reverend does, but there's lots to talk about. In our home province of Alberta, we're less than a week away from the Alberta Legislature resuming session. Obviously, there's a lot happening with federal politics as well, so we'll get into it. We wanted to let you know this episode of Real Talk happens with the presenting sponsorship of Alberta's top online real estate school. That's Relo, where better real estate training starts. You can find them online at relo.ca. That's where Alberta's most successful entrants into the real estate market will have schooled up and leveled up their knowledge and their skills. You can check out their pre-licensing courses online. Super easy to navigate the website. And that's kind of the whole point, because this entire journey for you is going to be online with the help of industry experts. You can work at your own pace. They support you where you need it. You can learn more about it and save a few bucks by signing up today. The promo code Ryan100, all one word, Ryan100, knocks $100 off the commercial and residential real estate bundles at relo.ca. Taking a quick browse through the headlines before we get to Michael Coren, wanted to mention this, and we'll touch on a story closer to home in the province of Alberta ahead of a Friday roundtable. We're going to be talking Alberta politics on Friday, including Danielle Smith, the Premier's upcoming leadership review. But I'm not sure if you saw this, but CBC's chief executive, Catherine Tate, at least for now, by the way, appearing just hours ago at a House of Commons Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage, and they're looking into the senior management compensation of those at CBC. You know, when people start talking about bonuses, especially bonuses using public dollars, this is where people can get really touchy. Mm-hmm. And the CBC kind of is, I guess, for a lot of folks, a touchy subject. It gets politicized. You remember we talked about this with Stephen Harper's former director of communications, Andrew McDougall, when he joined us on the show. That was on October 9th, if you missed that. Andrew McDougall joining us from London, actually with some words of wisdom for Pierre Poilievre. And he makes the assumption, for the sake of conversation, that Poilievre's going to form the next government, that he's going to be the next Prime Minister of Canada. And one of the things we talked about was whether or not Pierre Poilievre would make good on his promise, his vow to defund the CBC. Mm-hmm. And you can check out that episode. It was the 9th of October. Harper Comms boss warns Poilievre is the title of the episode if you're looking for it. But the reason I invoke that in this is that this is kind of an interesting story. Catherine Tate, CBC's president and CEO, in the context of this hearing, resisting calls from Conservatives to reject a financial exit package on her way out the door. So she's leaving, including bonuses when she leaves in January. She was defending spending more than $18 million on what they call performance pay or bonuses for staff at the CBC in this appearance before members of Parliament. Mm-hmm. People are, I think, probably successfully arguing that the optics of this are pretty tough, right? Like, it is 1,200 employees that are receiving these bonuses. So when you see $18 million, it's not going to like the CFO and one other person. It's not going to the C-suite. But the broadcaster meets performance indicators, so they're saying, yeah, this is justified. But MPs that are questioning them, including Nikki Ashton, says, can you acknowledge this hurts CBC's reputation? Mm-hmm. And I thought that was big, because you finally are having a conversation in front of the public, maybe not a public conversation, but a conversation the public can access and hear, that acknowledges that the CBC is potentially and probably in a bit of a damage control mode when it comes to the expenditures. Mm-hmm. And as this gets more and more politicized by Pierre Poilievre, effectively, then it's going to prompt more public examination and introspection into how and where those dollars are spent. So pretty interesting stuff happening in Ottawa. Damien Kirk is a Conservative MP, said it was, quote, unbelievable that taxpayers' dollars were being spent on bonuses, pointing out were some of the critics. those members of parliament, that some CBC executives earn more than the prime minister. I don't know if that's relevant or not. I do think that for the magnitude of the job that the prime minister does, the prime minister is underpaid, but that's kind of not the reason why people get that job. They don't really go into it for the money. Obviously, there's a lot of power. There's a lot of influence. The money's not too shabby. Off the top of my head, I think it's right around 300 gur.
The pension's good.
It's around 300. The pension's pretty decent. Let's just say your life after politics is probably coming with some pretty plum appointments.
Relaxed.
If you play your cards right, your speaker's fee is pretty hefty. Nobody's feeling sorry for the compensation for the prime minister. But to compare people doing jobs comparable to what they could be doing in the private sector. In other words, if the CBC, I'm not both sidesing this, but I'm just trying to have an honest and fair conversation about this. If you're trying to draw the best talent to a big broadcast entity like the CBC that has a budget in the billions, you do want to draw the best talent. And if you want to draw the best talent, then the salaries have to be comparable or at least in the same ballpark as what they would be in the private sector. Right?
Yeah.
Like if these folks were going to go get a job with like some big broadcast company in the States or some international company, right?
Yeah. I love the CBC. I love watching it, but this isn't money they've earned. You know what I mean? Like with a big corporation, they've earned billions of dollars.
You're saying like they're not like selling advertising for all this funding.
And then giving bonuses. This is bonuses. This is government money. Am I wrong? Like this
You're not wrong.
This is I have a problem with this. Yeah.
One of the Ms. Tate, by the way, for I should be quoting her as well to be fair here. Catherine Tate, she's on her way out in January, as mentioned. She calls it how she sees it as well in front of the committee. She basically says that it's highly demoralizing to be the target of constant criticism. And I've not walked mile. Well, we do walk miles in those shoes.
Welcome to the world.
Welcome to the world. But I will say that, a lot of times professionals, colleagues of ours that are out wearing the CBC Radio Canada logo do get chirped by people, and a lot of times members of the public. Yeah. You don't want to necessarily be wearing your big CBC jacket, rolling up in a CBC van to like the next Pierre Poilievre rally in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan.
Convoy.
You know what I mean? Go cover the convoy. You're like, I think I'll take my own car. Yeah. So fair enough there, but she does say, it's hard to attract people when the future of the organization is so certain. So they're going to make the argument that you got to pay them well, you got to look after them. And hey,
well, sure,
if
they
I'm
need
one
to
of those,
be compensated.
Well, if I'm getting the bonus, I'm going to say a deal's a deal.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
I lived up to my end of the bargain, so I deserve my bonus.
Sure.
And for a lot of people, we're not talking about people that are making $300,000 a year.
No.
But I do think that it's also fair to say that the media landscape has changed drastically.
How many radio hosts, getting bonuses?
Oh, dude.
How many terrestrial hosts? How many people on, your evening news do you know getting bonuses of this size? That just rubs me the wrong way.
If anything, people that are working, you say the evening news. Like,
you know what I mean.
No, I know.
Anyone you see on your TV delivering the news.
Who's watching, and no offense to anybody, but even the quote unquote evening news. It was once my dream as a 12-year-old after meeting Peter Jennings to be a 6 o'clock anchor.
Yeah, sure.
And now, if you believe that anybody's waiting till 6 o'clock to get the news for anything, you're fooling yourself. So we're seeing the big broadcast entities and the successful anchors, and there's lots of extremely talented storytellers out there. We're not throwing shade. I'm just saying, you're already out. You have a YouTube short out. You've already posted your TikTok. You've already got your update on Twitter, your 2-minute update. Catch more on our website.
Yeah.
Every once in a while they're saying catch the details at 6, but barely ever. So the point being in all of this, the entire landscape has changed, and so maybe the job descriptions, maybe the compensation for some of these professionals that have had pretty awesome gigs and they've got pretty awesome pensions coming up because they've worked for the CBC for 30 or 40 years. A lot of these folks have had it really great. There's going to be a bit of a wake-up call for some of the younger team members that are coming in. Some of these big broadcast entities, they're not just not doing the 6 o'clock news anymore. They're shutting down their shops.
6 o'clock. That's when people check out now. It used to be, I watch the news now occasionally, but it's almost for nostalgia. Remember when you used to gather around the TV right after dinner, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, take in all the news? By that time, I think people are, at least I would hope, they're trying to check out of their phones. They've been on them all day. They've driven home, listened to the updates on the radio. They've gotten their X alerts, their whatever media entities they're following. They're fully done. But Yeah, this whole thing just rubs me the wrong way. I think people at CBC are already compensated pretty fairly by the government, and if they want a bonus, sure, but these just seem very high.
Yeah, so, and it's been well known, and this will probably piss some people off that know us and people that we care about, but I mean, the fact of the matter is, and you know this to be true as well, a lot of the people that have worked for the CBC have had job security that other broadcasters haven't had, and they've been very well compensated for what they do. Plus, they've had professional supports. We always used to joke about it all the time. You'd have someone for like the lowly, like in the David and Goliath story, we were always the David, at least in our minds. Biblical reference for the Reverend Michael Coren coming up in just a quick second. But we were always the ones that were expected to punch outside our weight class. You know, the reporter is also shooting with the big camera, setting up their own tripod, doing their own, coming back, writing their own stuff, cutting their own story, handing, like, do you know what I mean?
Nowadays, your whole tool belt is.
But there'd be a lot more supports at the CBC, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Like, I want to bring the argument around here because there's an obvious something that we've not yet acknowledged here, and this is kind of, I guess, the crux of the whole issue, or at least a major pillar of the conversation. But, you know, you look back to these times where one person, kind of the Jack or Jill of all trades, is doing something for a private broadcaster, working on maybe a more serious budget, or making more to do with less based on some of the fiscal realities. And then the CBC's there with like the French language pros and the English language pros. You got the audio pros, you got the camera pros, you got the, and for a lot of people, I think that's rubbed folks in broadcasting the wrong way a lot of times.
100%.
Now, the obvious point that also needs to be discussed is that as mainstream for-profit corporate journalism dies on the vine and virtually collapses in a lot of circumstances, newspapers, television outlets, regional radio stations, the CBC becomes that much more important.
That's what I'm saying. Alberta Girl has a good comment right here. The CBC covers stories that CTV, Global, all these other entities we could mention don't. And I agree with that. But Yittrium right after says, listen, it was in their contract, so pay them. But going forward, just don't write the bonuses in. I believe that has to happen after this. I don't think there's anyone that reads this and thinks that this is fair compensation.
Yeah, Sylvia says it sounds like everybody has piss in their cornflakes this morning.
No, not
hey,
at
by
all.
the way, that was who made that quote famous. I don't want to jinx an interview. We got an interview coming up with Thomas Lukazik, and we're pairing him up with somebody. It's going to be firebrand type stuff. We'll do that ahead of the United Conservative AGM, and hopefully ahead of the start of the fall legislative session. But you remember Thomas Lukazik talking about piss in the cornflakes, and that was what made everybody laugh. This is in no way an attack or criticism on people that have fairly negotiated contracts, that have delivered on the terms of the contract, that deserve that compensation, are going to go get it. That's fine. You're not at fault. It's like what I always say about my buddy Darnell Nurse. Everybody rips on Darnell Nurse because he makes $9.25 million and he's struggling. It's not Darnell's fault that they offered him the money.
No.
Okay? I'm just saying that this executive, Catherine Tate, in a bit of a tough spot. We should mention her replacement has been named. It's former now Quebec television executive, longtime executive, Marie-Philippe Bouchard, who will be taking over reportedly as the new head of CBC Radio Canada in January. That's Le Devoir that is reporting that. So the new boss coming in has her work cut out for her when it comes to, I think probably, and this is something that the CBC should inherently do, and maybe it does it subtly a lot, but I think the CBC needs to really reiterate to Canadians the value of what it provides.
100%.
Right? And I'm not saying that's necessarily up to the professionals. I'm saying on the front lines, the journalists, the talk show hosts that show up to work every single day. They're doing that every single day. They're working hard to do that every single day. Yeah. But people perceive these fat cat execs getting the big paychecks on the public purse with a bit of disdain, especially when it gets politically supercharged.
And we who've been in the media just know, like, when jobs are cut, and then people get bonuses, and then you hear, hey, we're going to cut another, in the article, it says another 800 coming, and people keep getting bonuses, and funding goes up, and you hear 42 million and 125 million. That's what rubs people the wrong way. It sounds like you're getting more money in a bonus because X amount of people lost their job, and that really doesn't feel right.
Yeah. Cheryl says, my hubby and I watch CBC National News every morning. And they have some of the best shows. She says I've seen there first, like Schitt's Creek, Reservation Dogs, Better Things, etc. Like, I want to reference too.
Just even their Olympic coverage was incredible this year. Like, all of that.
They do a really good job. Yeah. It's important. I mean, my biggest man crush of all time is Ian Hannah-Mansing. And he does a great job. You know what? I'd love. I mean, he could never do it. We'd be putting him in a tough spot. But I'd love to get Ian kind of like on the record or off the record about what he makes about all this. I mean, these are people that work hard to tell good stories, and there's the distraction happening all above them, which is kind of unfortunate, but probably comes with the territory, right? Kimberly says, I'm so sick of corporate bonuses when only executives get them. A lot of folks are other saying, like I saw this one here from Travis, who says, where did I lose your comment now? He says, basically, the CBC provides a great service. It's important, but the bonuses are messed up. Jim says everybody's losing their mind over CBC compensation. When the TD chief resigns, is compensated all three major corporate issues costing billions, and he says, what, sorry? Fair enough, Jim. I mean, maybe this story is distracting from the others. Fair enough. Lottie, you were saying this is nothing different. I mean, this is just sort of the way that executive compensation works, right? Alberta Girl goes on to say CBC's been shredded by Rogers and others. They've had to struggle to get advertising revenues with relevant content. I saw some of you saying, what are you talking about, CBC? Like, they've got commercials up the yin-yang. It's just, it's not the same ball game.
Not at all.
Like imagine, you're opening a restaurant, with your own dough, watching your own bottom line, hiring your own people, attracting your own customers, and then the restaurant next door is also doing that and drawing on the same customers, but also gets, from the Magic Restaurant Ferry, gets $4 million every single year. It's not the same.
Their ad execs and ad people, don't get me wrong, their sales team is probably very talented and out there working hard, but not as hard as the other ones who don't have all this free money coming in down a pipeline every year, for sure. Right?
We're going to hear from we're going to be hearing from some of our friends that work for the CBC for sure.
Oh, we are, because they're going to be on soon. But
you know what they also know? You know what a lot of them also know is Catherine Tate was talking about this too. The CBC received and again, you can pull numbers kind of out of thin air and without context, it kind of, sounds like a lot when it is a lot. 42 million is a lot, but the CBC received 42 million additional just to kind of balance its books. And Ms. Tate, the chief executive, is saying, well, we might have to lay off up to 800 people, and it kind of sends shockwaves, through the team, as it would, obviously. People across the country going, am I going to be one of the 800? People going, gosh, 800, that's a lot. And then I guarantee if I put you on the spot, or if you put me on the spot and said, what was the most recent major, private operator, publicly traded, media conglomerate layoff, we wouldn't be able to cite it because there's been so many, and every single one of them is 300 here, 100 there, 250 here, 400 there. Yeah. And it's just become something where this is a bigger picture issue. The CBC obviously factors into it. I guess the question to Real Talkers, what I'd love to hear from you is where do you land on all of this? Johnny and I paint kind of a dire picture. I'm curious to see what Michael Coren's going to say about this. This guy's been a media veteran for years. But with all of this, sort of tough news, tough headlines, media entities dying on the vine, the breadth of the storytelling, the local news coverage, this historical record keeping, the political accountability in action, all of the things that the Fourth Estate is supposed to provide, and the demise of it and all the doom and gloom around it. Where do you land on the role that the CBC should play? What do you make of the politics around it? What's your take on the bonuses? Send us an email to talk@ryanjespersen.com. Every Friday we present, in partnership with the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park, the Flamethrower, which is your chance to get your hottest takes off your chest. That's Fridays on Real Talk. We also push it out as a separate podcast. It's about 6 minutes, 5-6 minutes of just rock and roll, baby, on Saturday mornings. I think people might be interested to know that sometimes the Flamethrower podcast on Saturdays outperforms half the episodes during the week. People just love to hear folks blowing a gasket.
It's better than Saturday morning cartoons.
I thought you were going to say better than sex. I didn't know. I was going to be inclined to agree, as a matter of fact. Thought it was pretty good.
I don't know about that.
Yeah. All the sweating, half the satisfaction. What? Our
New
friends
tagline.
I'm just going to roll hot into a mention, and I hope our friends at Complete Care Restoration don't mind. As a matter of fact, they face disasters every single day. Yeah, that's right. They are masters of restoring property and rebuilding peace of mind with more than 25 years of experience in Western Canada, including right now in Jasper and surrounding area. If, heaven forbid, your home, your business, your community is impacted by fire, flooding, whatever it is, smoke damage. Maybe you found some asbestos or black mold in what you thought was going to be a small reno project. Their team's ready to jump into action, ready to respond 24/7. You can find them online at CompleteCareRestoration.com. And I want to quickly direct your attention to Friesen.com. That's FRESON.com, where you can find our friends at Friesen Brothers, proudly Alberta grown and Alberta owned. They've got a couple of things happening right now, including their Pick 5 for $25 meat sale. Check this out on the website. Pick 5 for $25 is back. This week, all customers can choose from more than 50 cuts of meat. 50 of them, and mix and match any 5 packs for just $25. You can find more information on the weekly flyer at Friesen.com.
Tony says she doesn't mind bonuses when people have overperformed. But I think that's the problem, though. Like, we all know CBC is underperforming. The ratings have been declining for years, and that's not just them. That's all, terrestrial and TV media. We know that. So that's what hurts so much. People losing jobs, ratings down, lots of money in people's pockets. Right?
Yeah, well, and we don't know what everyone's contracts look like. We don't know what is.
No, maybe they had 10-year.
What is meeting your bonus look like for someone in sales versus someone in editorial versus somebody in HR? They're all going to look different. This is not. I'm not saying tear up the contracts. I'm not a provincial politician that's cool with just like tearing up contracts. I'm just saying that I do agree that, and this is NDP and Conservative MPs that are saying this to the CBC's executive. There's a bit of a reputation problem right now, and if an outlet like the CBC starts to lose the public trust, and then you start to lose the public's confidence in your basically justification to exist, then you've got a real issue.
I want the CBC. That's why this bothers me, because I know it's going to piss people off and ruin their rep.
I do think that there are people that inherently just want to see the CBC burn. I get that. I think for a lot of those people, let's be honest, like real talk is that there's kind of an ideological element to that. If you feel this way, if you'd like to just blow up, I'm talking metaphorically, if you'd like to blow up the CBC, if you'd like to put thousands of professionals out of work, if you'd like to pull the plug on it and its funding, then you probably feel like, if we're being honest, you probably feel like the coverage isn't fair to your political party of choice. You probably feel like you think that the CBC itself is on a bit of a soapbox, or that it has an ideological bend, or that it's trying to hammer home or reiterate certain political allegiance, right? Like, people typically feel politically supercharged about the CBC. I don't see a lot of people saying it does not provide a valuable journalistic service.
No, that's
I don't
the
think
funny
you can
thing.
Make the argument.
Whenever somebody's like, defund the CBC, I'm like, why? Like, the nature of things, you don't like. What do you hate about it so much? Because their coverage is a little biased. All coverage everywhere on all media sites are a little biased these days.
But you remember what happened in Alberta. This was like, 10 years ago, I think it was, approximately, when they bestowed an honorary doctorate at the University of Alberta to David Suzuki, host of The Nature of Things, and people lost their minds.
Yeah.
They lost their minds.
They hate insects and birds.
Well, what they hate is and here at the University of Alberta, in an interesting position where a lot of its funding comes from, where it's located, the role that fossil fuels and oil and gas plays in the economy in Alberta, the economy of that university, quite frankly, and then to bestow an honorary doctorate, which essentially looked like, came across like, or at least was portrayed as an endorsement of some of the things David Suzuki said about the environment and climate change. Which,
the pipelines blowing up thing was a big controversy, and
there's a lot of layers to it. Oh man, we could talk about this for 5 freaking hours.
Let's get in our guests.
No kidding. I love this from Ken. $5 from Super Chat Ken, who says Patreon and small donations pay for great content that's valuable. Effing rights, Ken. He says, you get what you pay for, and no, I'm not wealthy. He says, at least guys hit the like button. Ken, the $5 there means a lot to us. The likes and shares mean a lot to us as well, and so do interviews like this. A chance to connect with somebody who I've got a lot of respect for. I've always enjoyed talking to the Reverend Michael Coren. He's the author of 20 books. He's a contributing columnist to the Toronto Star, the Globe and Mail. You've read him in the Walrus, TV Ontario in Canada, and of course a bunch of religious publications as well. He's an ordained minister in the Anglican Church of Canada, and he's out with a brand new book, Heaping Coals. Welcome back to Real Talk, Reverend. It's nice to see your face. Congratulations on the new book.
Thank you. It's been a while, hasn't it?
It has been a while. Hey, well, we're throwing you a hot potato. You're no stranger to hot potatoes. What do you make of the public relationship with the CBC, how it's been politicized, this story about the bonuses, and maybe kind of the future of Canada's public broadcaster?
It's largely irrelevant, to be honest. It's a complete digression. Look, if you really want to talk about issues, the billions and billions of dollars that super wealthy people avoid paying taxes on. Look, the CBC is a mixed bag. I think radio is very good, TV not as good. If you really do care for this country, you would want to support it, because I can tell you, having traveled abroad quite a bit, you get rid of a public broadcaster, particularly in a country like Canada, you're going to be in trouble. I was in private radio for years, and there's a very limited future for private radio. Newspapers in this country are doing very badly. I've just spent a month in the UK, way better over there. There are new publications starting up, not happening here. So, look, Canada is always in the position of having a superpower right on our border. And there are lots of people there who would like to gobble up what we have in media here. And as flawed as you may think the CBC is, without it, we will be in a bad place.
Do you have a gut instinct on what's going to happen November 5th in the U.S.?
No. Canada, yeah, I think we all know what's going to happen there. In the US, it could go either way. I mean, I think you could see the Democrats winning the popular vote but losing the election. But it will be a very foolish person to put money on that result. I really have no idea.
Yeah, it's hard to pin anybody down and get them on the record. Andrew McDougall, Harper's former comms boss, on October 9th went on the record, told us he's predicting a Trump presidency, but most political commentators right now are saying it's too close to call. What gives you the confidence more than a year out, or let's say approximately a year out, that I'm assuming you're suggesting there will be a change in the Prime Minister's office?
Yeah, I think the NDP will win the election. Look, I have no animus against Justin Trudeau, but there's obviously a pride issue here. And I don't think he's been a particularly bad prime minister either. I mean, I understand there are people who detest him and despise him. I've never understood that. He's been adequate, often better than that, in fact. But look, if he walked on water, people would wonder why he couldn't swim. There's nothing he can do right at this point. The Liberal brand is more popular than the Liberal leader. Whenever that happens to a party, it's time to change. But I fear it's too late. If they're bringing someone else in here, and obviously there's a lot of discontent within the caucus and in the membership nationally, but if they bring somebody else in now, it'll be seen as desperation. A year ago, it would have been seen as constructive. We are bringing forward a new leader. It's time for change, but never exhibit anything resembling panic to your opponent. No, I would be very confident of a Conservative victory in the next election. And then, of course, the issue of the CBC and funding. And if I had to make a prediction there, I would say there'll be a push to remove funding from CBC television, but not CBC radio.
Yeah.
You know, but that's my feeling. Again, it's not a major issue financially. There are way bigger challenges than that. I think it will be a bad thing. It's not that I don't even watch very much TV anymore. And it's not that the CBC does a wonderful job, but it does a job. It does a Canadian job. And those people who say they love Canada so much, they're so patriotic, we should get rid of the CBC. I'm afraid that's very paradoxical, because what will happen is, as I mentioned earlier, all sorts of private interests will fill the vacuum. And look, the book I have out. The other day I spent 25 minutes or so, a wonderful interview on CBC radio. And where else would that happen? I'll do a lot of interviews, but not
here.
Yes, but look, you have gone outside of the mainstream,
Sure.
And you've had to do that. I still work for a lot of people in journalism. I write a column for the Star. I'm quite often in the Globe and elsewhere. Everyone is struggling. In the UK, again, I mean, I know what people pay. If you're online, they pay a certain amount. If you're in print, they pay another. I made a good living as a journalist for many years. I raised a family. I couldn't do that now. I mean, I'm old. I'm semi-retired now. But I can remember writing a syndicated column for the Sun newspapers. And every time it was syndicated, Calgary, Edmonton, Winnipeg, wherever, I think you got about between $25 and $50. This is quite a few years ago. But if you're syndicated in 7 or 8 publications, on top of your base payment, you can make quite a lot of money. Today, that's really of the past. Syndication, newspapers own smaller newspapers, but syndication fees, that's history. So when kids say to me, I want to be a journalist, what do you recommend? And I usually say, maybe a course in accounting, because it's very, very difficult. And Substack and all the rest of it, it's like a podcast. There are myriad, there are so many of them, and it's only a handful that really do very well. And getting that chemistry that appeals to people, very, very difficult. So I don't want to sound pessimistic about it, but journalism is not in a healthy place. And the idea of getting rid of something which is successful and does cover Canadian issues and is for all Canadians, the idea of getting rid of that at such a time is beyond me.
Yeah, I don't think you're pessimistic. I think you're being realistic. And it pains me to know that like young, bright people, the next great storytellers may be dissuaded, and it may be their common sense that is dissuading them, but maybe dissuaded from a career in journalism. I think that the whole model is changing. You acknowledge that we're doing something different. We still feel like we're in our infancy, and we're still kind of getting the lay of the land. I do believe that there's a huge importance, not just for reporting and journalism, which we don't necessarily do. We get a lot of people on the record, but we're more analysis, public opinion, that sort of a thing. I think there's a real need for both, people to hash things out, people to wrestle with different issues, to test their theories, to be held accountable, all of these types of things that make us stronger, iron sharpening iron, so to speak. But I do wonder what it looks like, and how the 15 to 24-year-old right now is kind of perceiving whether or not it makes sense to like invest in post-secondary education, to grind it out. Johnny, where was your first radio gig? Like, did you do like small market anywhere?
No, I was lucky. I came right here to
Edmonton.
You want me to say the name?
Sure, I don't
It was
care.
91.7 The Bounce then, and now it's Kiss FM.
Yeah, okay, cool.
So I was lucky. I got plucked. I got kind of, I was a DJ. I had a good voice, and they said,
okay, so you were already a professional in the public eye.
Yeah.
They wanted to bring in a skilled DJ and give you a radio show. Okay, interesting. Michael, a lot of people start in like, Timmins, Ontario, High Prairie, something like this, making like 20 grand a year, grinding it out using the food bank. And I just don't know that those opportunities are even going to be there anymore, let alone any interest to do it. Lorraine says, she's talking about the role that the CBC plays and obviously feels convicted. It's important. She says with big media players being controlled by right-wing hedge funds, we need the CBC more than ever. We need small, independent media as well. I mean, you and I both know, Michael, that in a lot of markets, a lot of stories that are being told, national news stories of particular interest, are only being told by the CBC because it doesn't make financial sense for anybody else to be there.
If I could just respond to that comment, though, I mean, I know what the person meant, and I agree to a certain degree, but right-wing hedge funds generally aren't political. They're about money. They want to make money. And if you have a very successful left of center, not radical left, but left of center media platform, they'd support that as well. I mean, let's not get bogged down in this right-left thing. I think we can do a bit better than that. It's independent voices in media. We want lots of different voices speaking. What you do tend to get, and even the CBC is like this, you'll get a very narrow range of moderate right and moderate left. I had a TV show for years in this country, and I had a strong point of view, but I always encouraged quite radical opinions from all sides. I'd have a Labour leader and a Conservative politician, I'd have an Israeli and Palestinian leaders on the show, and I thought it made for very good TV. It was entertaining. Canada can be a bit bland in its coverage. It is quite safe. No, I mean, I've been here most of my life, but my formation was in the UK. It's more edgy. You're encouraged to say things that might provoke, and no one. I mean, we have 4 children. They don't listen to the radio. They don't buy newspapers. Their way of consuming media is radically different. So, in a way, the discussion about the future of the CBC in itself is a little pointless, because within not even a generation, within 10 years, it will be transformed. And Twitter, for example, Twitter's dying. I mean, it'll take a while, but it's in very bad shape. There'll be something else invented. I'm old enough to remember when the internet wasn't an issue. Social media didn't really exist. There are people who make a living predicting. Well, ignore them. They don't know what will happen. We do not know what media will look like in years to come. I do worry about that because although people are very cynical about this, when you do have an office where there are editors and sub-editors and people say, well, is that actually true? Can we print that? That is healthy. Now the sort of conspiracy theories and nonsense that is thrown out there, which can be incredibly damaging, not just in terms of racism and anti-Semitism and so on, but also conspiracy theories about vaccines. And I mean, this can lead to people suffering, can lead to people dying, for goodness sake. So we do need responsible media. And that is not confined to the CBC, but we don't always find responsibility outside of it.
We're talking to the Reverend Michael Coren. He's got a new book out, Heaping Coals. And speaking of Twitter, I'm just noticing, courtesy of your account, you're letting us know we're speaking to you the day after the 5th anniversary of when you were ordained. So I guess happy anniversary on that. 5 years. It's a bit of a milestone there.
Thank you. Yeah, I was ordained a deacon. What happens is you're ordained a deacon, which is the big one. Ordination is the biggie. And then if you don't do anything too bad after that, within about a year and a half or so, you're made a priest. Except 3 years ago.
Okay, there you go. Last night, by the way, is in our live chat right now. It says Twitter is dying. LOL. Last night is like rolling, laughing on the floor. But I've seen like certain elements of Twitter dramatically change. I think most people that use it have. I don't know about dying. It's certainly gone in a different direction. What do you think?
With respect to someone who would go take the time to write LOL and some sort of picture of him on the. No, look, I have I don't know, 36, whatever, how many thousand followers I have. Since Musk bought it, I've lost about 7,000. There's been another. People are leaving all the time. It's not that it's become more angry. I mean, my golly, I had huge organized attack campaigns on me long before Musk was involved. Death threats, accusations, libel. I never complained about any of this. Someone complained on my behalf. It was someone who made the most incredible accusation about me. And the response was, no, this doesn't break the standards of the. So I don't blame Elon Musk for everything, but I think he's rather clumsily changed the way it actually works. I mean, I find a tweet 5 years ago that would have reached a huge number of people doesn't anymore. And I'm more interested in the inner workings that have actually, I think, they've gone downhill. I mean, Twitter, it's very, very conservative in a small c sense to think, no, Twitter's going to be fine. Sorry, I think that in a few years it won't be an alternative platform. It'll be something totally different to what we have now. You can never control something as organic as media. It's changing all the time. If you would have said to people not that long ago, the daily newspaper wouldn't really exist as we thought it, they would say, well, that's just not true. I just came back from the UK. The Evening Standard, I write for the Evening Standard, is now a weekly. When I was growing up, there were 2 daily evening papers in London, huge, enormous things. My father would come home from work. He was a cab driver. And he would say, this happened. And I would say, how do you know, Dad? And he would say, it was in the paper. It was in the evening news that he'd read. There's now one evening London paper, a huge city, and it's now a weekly. So all sorts of things that we took for granted are changing. And I mean, look, I'm quite active on Twitter. I enjoy it. But I know as someone who has quite a big following, Twitter is simply not what it was. And inevitably, in a year's time, it will be saying then it's not what it was.
Yeah, we have, I think this is Shauna who says Twitter up until November 15th, then the new rules kick in, and then it's not going to be worth it. If I'm on the same page as Shauna, I think that's when they're introducing these new block rules. You and I haven't really talked about this, but I'm sure you saw this as well, Michael. If you have people blocked on Twitter currently, when the new rules kick in or the new terms of service, those folks that have been blocked are going to be able to see everything you post. They're just not going to be able to interact with it.
Yeah. But that's the whole point of a block. The whole point of a block is to get the privacy, and now you're taking that away.
Right?
Yeah. It's more important than that. Look, I've had people send me videos of them at a gun range saying, I'm going to kill you. Now, not many, but I've had those. I've had endless accusations that I'm a pedophile, a child abuser, because I wear a collar, and because people don't like my politics, I must be. And that sort of thing. Now, I don't particularly care, in all honesty. There are young women who've had death threats, who've been rape threats, the most appalling garbage thrown at them. The idea that the people they've blocked can now see what they're posting is obscene. And it's redundant too. Why is he bothering to do this? It's not encouraging free speech. I've blocked probably thousands of people. I mean, I haven't looked at the blocks. I mean, several hundred, possibly, I'm sure more than 1,000. Now, a lot of them aren't real. They're bots and trolls. They don't exist anymore. But some of them are deeply malicious people who follow me. They tell the same lies repeatedly. Look, I remember my last book, that was about 2 or 3 years ago. There was a review, the most horrible, that book did very well, actually, the most horrible review on Amazon. And it was there before the book had even been published. And Amazon shouldn't have allowed it to be there because obviously I hadn't read the book. No one had read the book. But when people are obsessive about you as this, they try all sorts of ways to get to your Twitter account. you can see when they're making fake accounts to try and get on, and they'll abuse you and you block them. Yeah, it's very unfortunate that he's going to change the rules. And it's also damaging. He'll lose another wave of people. And there, as I say, there's no alternative. The other Twitter light things, they're not working yet. Not one of them has succeeded. But I don't know. I still use it. Facebook is for older people. I'm on, what's the other one called? WhatsApp, but I find it very hard to break through on that. My kids keep telling me, this is how you do it, Dad.
Yeah. I don't know. We're on, like Real Talk as an entity is on TikTok, where I think we got our most followers on TikTok. Relatively modest still. I think it's like 11, 12,000 followers, something like that. And then we're on Twitter, which I kind of like, And then we're on Instagram, which Instagram I think you have a little bit more fun on. It seems
a little more sunshine on there.
Maybe there is, but Akat was here in the chat saying like kids these days, they're getting their news, including like news on like Gaza and Beirut and like around the world on TikTok. Which is kind of interesting. Yeah, I would say, though, Michael, I don't know if you've had this experience. We sure have with our posts on TikTok, Johnny, that TikTok censors content like you wouldn't believe. Like we had Jordan Tutu. I don't know if you're familiar, the first Inuk to ever play for Team Canada in the World Juniors, a former star of the Nashville Predators and now living a sober life, a really remarkable story, was with us in studio a while ago. And he was telling stories about how growing up in Rankin Inlet and shoveling walks in the pitch black and minus 50 at 5 a.m. kind of hardened him into who he is now, because he had to deal with fear, because there was a very real possibility that literal polar bears or wolves could attack him while he was out shoveling. And so we post this clip, and we're sort of talking about like, is this one of the toughest guys in human history type idea? And we showed a couple clips of him, body checking guys and throwing a few punches, and that was down off TikTok before you could even believe it. I mean, it was just like it's pretty wild how touchy it gets, let alone conversation. Our sobriety stuff got pulled down, talking about alcohol. We were talking about mushrooms, like psychedelics, pulled down off TikTok. So I don't know. I don't think that's great for a site where people are going for their journalism.
I mean, I'm on Instagram, and I must work a bit harder on that. But I mean, I don't really have the time. But TikTok, I'm for goodness sake, and I just had my over 65 flu shot. I mean, I'm not a kid. Can I really be bothered to go on TikTok? And a lot of the stuff I do, it's less visual. I mean, I'm writing things, and TikTok is a visual medium. So you have to ask. I mean, you need to do that. What you're doing, you have to appeal. But I have to ask myself, what is the point?
Michael, with the right editing, you would be an absolute star on TikTok. You would, man. It's like compelling, provocative takes in 60 seconds or less with a call to action at the end. You would nail it. Shout out to Sylvia in our super chat. She says a $10 contribution to the show. She says, great content. Thank you for efforts in creating reasonable conversations. We're hanging out with the Reverend Michael Coren. The whole we love that he's hanging out with us regardless, but the reason he's here to talk is he's got a brand new book out, Heaping Coals. I want to jump into it with you next, Reverend. I want to ask how you go from media firebrand to Anglican priest, and that whole heaping coals thing. It's a biblical metaphor about returning kindness for hostility. How does that play into today's politics? That coming up with the Reverend Michael Coren in 60 seconds. First, I want to remind you that California Closets is the first visit and the only visit you need to make if you're looking for a custom closet or a storage solution, regardless of where in the home you're talking about. That consultation with their design team is free. That's where you go in, you talk a little bit about your space, you talk to them about your vision, you discuss your budget, and then they can start getting to work designing what they will guarantee is the perfect install to meet your needs and stay on that budget. Be like the Edmonton Oilers backstopper Stuart Skinner and discover the incredible bang for buck you get when you deal with California Closets at californiaclosets.ca. A shout out to our friends at Kubi Renewable Energy as well. It doesn't matter that the leaves are falling. It doesn't matter that the temperatures are dropping. I hate to say it. It doesn't matter that there will soon be snow on the ground. They're not pulling that we're hiring sign out of their window. Oh no, their team is always growing. You can check out the careers link at kubyenergy.ca. That's KUBY energy.ca. They're young, they're growing, and they are reshaping the energy portfolio in Canada. If you're unemployed, underemployed, or just looking to kickstart your career in energy, consider Kubi Energy at kubyenergy.ca. Hanging out with the Reverend Michael Coren. He's got a brand new book out, Heaping Coals. Reverend, I'm curious to know what goes into naming the book. The premise of it, obviously that biblical principle about returning kindness for hostility. How does that factor in or apply to today's political landscape and what's often described as today's polarized world?
It's a good question. Actually, it wasn't my title. My title was pretty lame. And then someone at the publisher said, I know, here's a title. And great idea.
There you go.
There's the practical issue. We mentioned social media. I've had some very vicious attacks on Twitter. Now, what do these people want when they abuse you and attack you and insult you and threaten you? They want you to be intimidated. They want you to be angry. They want you to react in a nasty way. So what is the best way to react? Gently. Mock them maybe a little bit. Sometimes, I blocked a lot of people. But if you respond with, I forgive you, or I'm sorry you feel that way, God bless. I think it is the Christian, well, I know it's a Christian response, but also, let's be honest, you win the argument. And what you have to remember on social media is people say to me, oh, why are you engaging with this person? I'm not engaging with that person. I'm engaging with the thousands of people who are watching me engage with that person. And they're wondering how a guy wearing a funny collar is going to react to someone who's just insulted them. So I think if we could do this in greater life, in political life as well, I'll give you an example. A politician in the UK, Scottish nationalist leader, excuse me, he died recently. He was very polarizing as a figure. A lot of people disliked him intently. When he died, what was said about him was very kind and quite forgiving, quite loving in a way. What a wonderful world it will be if people spoke like that and behaved like that when that person was still alive. Now, I'm not being Pollyanna-ish. I'm not being naive. I'm a pretty wealthy person. I've seen a lot of stuff. But we have become so polarized. We react so violently and angrily to things which really aren't even that significant. We get things out of proportion. And I think it has done damage to the body politic. I blame social media to a large extent. I remember once meeting someone who'd been very abusive about me. And I think he was actually a bit intimidated, but he was so apologetic and he had objectified me and thought, well, this is not a person with feelings and a family and fears and ambitions or whatever. And this is what tends to happen. We don't think of the person. We just think of the way we feel about what that person said or what that person represents. And some of the things that are said about Trudeau are absolutely appalling. He's not a bad man. You might not like his politics. Fine, vote for another party. You might think he hasn't been a good prime minister. Fine, get rid of him. But the abuse and the attacks, the personal attacks on this man, he's a democratic leader in a very tolerant and multicultural nation. Absolutely unacceptable what is being said about him. And also the things that are said about conservative leaders. Pierre Poilievre, I've met him, I don't know him, but what the left says about him sometimes, the man is not a racist. He's not homophobic. He's a conservative leader. I disagree with some of his policies. But for goodness sake, to blanket him with all of these isms, you're this and you're that. He's not a fascist, for goodness sake. He's a conservative leader, a quite right-wing conservative leader. Disagree with him. But don't abuse and insult simply because you dislike what you think is someone's politics.
How about this from Cheryl outside in our live chat? Says, I unwittingly heaped coals this morning. She says, a driver almost ran me down while I was walking to Starbucks. I saw her head to the drive-thru, so I walked in and paid her tab. I hopefully improved her mood. Cheryl, I should have saved that for positive reflections next Monday. That's incredible.
God bless you. I mean, that is an incredible thing to do. And you don't have to be a Christian to embrace all of this. But, those acts of kindness, I mean, a lot of what I do as a priest, people think you go around discussing Christianity the whole time. No, you don't. I mean, you do a bit of that. Obviously, I preach a lot and I preside, but a lot of what I do is to take communion to people in care homes, people in hospitals. I see people on the margins and fringes of society, people who no thought of their own are suffering terribly. And those small acts of goodness and kindness are, and this is not hyperbole, it's not exaggeration, they are world-changing because they're life-changing. And by changing a life, you do change the world. And you can scream on about politics for hours and hours, days and days, and often you don't actually change anything. But by individual contact, by reaching out to someone, I'll tell you what one of the great suffering points of modern society is, and that's loneliness, isolation. I come across so many people who are desperately lonely. And if you can try to work on that and include people, and how many people spend Thanksgiving or Christmas alone, you'd be amazed. So we can change things bit by bit. And I know there are people saying, oh, yeah, really, that's not how we do it. Ask yourself this. All these parties you voted for, all these changes of government you've achieved, has it brought what you really wanted to your country or to your province or to your city? Bet you it hasn't. But individual transformation, yeah, that is life-changing.
Lou in our chat says Pierre Poilievre is divisive. He stokes hate. Akat says maybe Michael hasn't seen Poilievre's ads on during the postseason Major League games. Go Dodgers, by the way, where he says he's going to end, quote, woke obsessions. I saw one of the most effective political ads I've ever seen, but it also felt like a bit of a punch in the gut. And it also, like, have you seen the Trump one? Have you seen the Trump one, Johnny, where it says Kamala is for they, them, Donald Trump is for you?
Yeah.
I just went, whoa. Like, that is such an effective political ad, but it's
a very clever ad.
But I bet it punches people right in the face too, right? Like this is what's working in politicking these days. It's what's effective. Just look around.
I mean, I didn't say Poilievre wasn't divisive. Obviously, he is. I mean, that's just a fact because people are divided. I just don't think he's the evil that some people like to present. His advertising is crass. But then, I mean, the left, the liberals have. I can remember an ad about Stephen Harper, I think, and aircraft carriers. But look, politics is not an honest business. I know people who work for the liberals, and I don't want to say too much, but they're not it's not that they're the ethical, moral people, and all the conservatives aren't. My politics are sort of social democrat, liberal. I don't find any party really represents me. But as I say, I was in Britain for a while, for 3 or 4 weeks, and one of my dearest friends, my oldest friends, is a Conservative MP, and a lot of his politics I so disagree with. I also know him to be one of the kindest people I've ever met. And again, to be a little vague here, but a church I'm part of, one of our community lunch, we reach out to people who are really, they need a lot of help. One of the main people behind it is a former senior Conservative politician. And I see him there unloading the truck and doing wonderful work. So I want to see the individual and the person and the soul behind the politician. And I've met a lot of politicians. Some of them are disappointing. Well, a number of them are disappointing. Very few of them are bad. I've met very few actually bad people in politics. Disappointing, people I wouldn't vote for and support, but bad, very few.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of a vague way to describe somebody bad. What makes somebody bad? If somebody's bad, if they operate in bad faith, are they bad? I mean, obviously, if they're stealing, if they're abusing people, I mean, like what you know what I'm saying? I mean, bad is just kind of like a bad. Dude.
I think a lot of people would say either Trudeau or Poilievre are bad people. I think a lot of Canadians would say that, and they wouldn't have said that a generation ago in terms of party politics. There's far too little respect for people who represent other points of view, and I'm not talking about extremism. I'm not talking about fascism here or revolutionary Marxism that wants to put people in gulag. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about within the democratic framework. I very seldom meet people who I think are bad people. I can think of one politician right now who I think is quite a bad person.
Who?
But that's it. I'm not going to say who.
Come on.
Come on, Michael.
I'm not even going to say her gender.
Okay.
Oh, man.
Okay. Is she in Canada? Is she a politician in Canada?
Not going to say anymore.
Okay. All right. All right. Hey, let me ask you this. You've shifted your views on a lot of important issues over the years, including LGBTQ2S+ inclusion. You've discussed it publicly. You've talked about it on this show before. What's been the most challenging aspect for you of making those changes, and how have you addressed or approached criticism from people who have accused you of inconsistency or hypocrisy?
Well, that's on a good day. I mean, the others... they targeted my family. Some of them went after one of my daughters in particular. Mind you, she's tough enough to take them on, but it was pretty bad what was thrown at me. But the laugh was greater. The support I received wasn't so much that. I mean, that was nasty, being cancelled, losing jobs and speeches. I mean, it just went on and on and on. I've seen cancel culture, and it's not confined to the left, believe me. The right play that game too. So I've seen all that, and that was nasty, but I'm a big boy. I think it was personal friendships that were lost. People There were many friends who said, I disagree with you now, Mike, but you're my friend. I love you. But there were other people who turned on me. And that did hurt me. It came this is 10 years ago now. It came at quite a cost, but it was more than worth it. I couldn't do anything about it anyway. I changed within. I had to change. And I had to say that publicly. But it was the inability, particularly in the Christian world, of people to say, well, he's my brother in Christ, and he's changed his views, not on the creed. He believes every word of the creed. He believes Jesus is the Son of God. He believes absolutely in Christian conversion, virgin birth, resurrection. But on one aspect of Christian teaching, he's changed his view. And I can't say, well, that's fascinating. I don't agree with him, but through prayer and reading and meeting people, experience has changed, and I'll support him in that. There was so much hostility and so much anger. And that did disappoint me. I was disappointed in many people in the Christian world. But that was then, and some of those people have come around, most of them haven't, but that's okay. We disagree. But, I've always made a point of saying that if you disagree with me on issues of equal marriage and full acceptance of gay people and so on, if you disagree, as long as you come from a place of love, we can disagree amicably. I have many friends, and we disagree on those issues. What I don't understand is people who just reject you completely simply because on some issues you have a different point of view.
I appreciate you saying that. I'm curious to know how you managed, like as a public figure and a well-known commentator across the country, how you managed, the risk of your faith maybe becoming politicized. And how did you, with this book, Heaping Coals, how does that address the intersection of faith and politics?
Right. That's a very good question, because it's very important that we don't if we're Christians, don't make our faith completely political. Of course, it's political. I mean, we have politics and I have views, but everyone is included in this big tent that is the church. I mean, this is a memoir. So what I'm trying to show is the evolution of my life from growing up in the UK, coming to Canada, journalism, and then becoming a priest. The book ends with my ordination 5 years ago. I've tried I wrote the book a while back now, so I'm trying to remember everything I wrote, but I know that I'm pretty sure there are some things people will object to. For example, I talk about Brian Lilly and Laurie Goldstein, who I say are my friends. I disagree with them, particularly Brian, but Brian is my friend. He's never said anything nasty about me. We disagree, but I'm not going to turn on him because we have different points of view. I talk about people on the right, on the conservative right, who I respect. And this is important because if being a follower of Jesus means anything, if being a priest means anything, to me, it's saying, there's Jesus, and then getting out of the way. It's not about me. It's about saying, there is Jesus Christ. Now I get out of the picture and encourage people to have a personal relationship. And that means you mustn't close the door on people. And I can think of someone right now, actually he's ordained, who says the most acid things about conservatives over and over again. He does it publicly. Thank goodness he's not very well. People don't read his stuff very often. But I think to myself, you shouldn't be doing that. This is not the way to behave. It's one thing to criticize Donald Trump. He deserves criticism. But you're saying to people who vote conservative in Canada, you have no heart, you have no love in you. That's not true at all. Absolutely untrue. Reason with people. Show empathy. Understand how other people feel. My golly, if we could inject empathy into the body politic, we'd all be so much better off. Understand other people. Why do they feel the way they do? I've met people from extreme backgrounds who've come out of that. I did a lot of work in the UK with those people who left the far right, which is not very big, thank goodness, but they'd fled racism and fascism. And some of them were very odd, but a lot of them, they felt victimized. They felt nothing had gone in their favor. They hadn't had any breaks in life. Now, that wasn't completely true, but when you spoke to them and listened to them and reached out to them and said, well, how about the experience of the people you used to hate? What do you think their life is like? Do you think they haven't felt the same way? And you build bridges. And it's important that we do that. And in case people think, well, that's just very naive. I also worked in Northern Ireland, and particularly with loyalist paramilitaries. I covered some of their actions for magazines in the UK. And I've met some people who these are really hard men, they've done some very bad stuff. I've seen some of them come out of that lifestyle. and become more moderate, understanding people. So never give up on people, and never caricature people. And as I mentioned earlier, don't objectify. See the human and the humanity in every person.
Don't read too much into the comparison, but you do have a lot in common with Charles Adler, who was appointed to the
My senator. Have I been made a senator? Wow, that's brilliant.
Right? Yeah, I mean, good for him. An amazing opportunity, obviously, to serve his country. But I mean, a lot of people have kind of called him to the carpet for his comments on the Senate, and also for some of the other stuff he said over the course of a 40-year talk show career. Anyway, Stephen throws a fastball here. I know you won't mind it. I'm sure you'd want to take it on. In our live chat, says Coren was once a very hardline neoliberal pro-war writer in the Sun. While I welcome his change, it's hard to forget some of the stuff he was writing in the mid-2000s. What would you say to Stephen if you were having coffee with him?
I doubt if you want to have coffee with me, but sure, if he doesn't want to forget, don't forget. I mean, neoliberal, I don't know what that is. I'm pro-war. Interesting that, because I think I was one of the first people to, I opposed the Iraq War. I stood out as a conservative who opposed the Iraq War. There weren't that many of us. So I'm not sure where he gets that from. I was against the arms trade. I had Palestinian leaders on my TV show before they were given any room in Canadian media. So I don't know where he gets that. Again, you see, this is a caricature. Neoliberal, pro-war. I said all sorts of things that that make me cringe now. And I've spent 10 years trying to repair that damage. But that's quite a good example of not seeing the humanity in someone. Said things that aren't true. And instead of saying, wow, for 10 years, you've taken a lot of garbage and you've been physically threatened and your family have been attacked and you lost most of your journalistic career, build it up again, thank the Lord. That's wonderful that you did that. It's can't forgive. Forgiveness is one of the great needs of the contemporary world. And lack of forgiveness is a terrible sin. And I know we're not meant to say the word sin, but it's a terrible sin if you cannot forgive. I mean, I've forgiven people who have done pretty bad things to me. It says a lot about, it's not about them so much, it's about me. Even if they have not asked for forgiveness, I need to forgive. But that's okay. I mean,
what's your understanding of you talk about forgiveness in the book, and Heaping Coals, you write about it, your understanding of the limits of forgiveness? Like if we're talking about systemic injustice or abuse, or like, what's your understanding of the limits of forgiveness?
Well, forgiveness is not the same as in injustice. Now, if you've committed a crime, you must pay a price for that. There's a penalty to pay. And we have to hold people to account. I'm talking about personal forgiveness, people who... There is an amazing story of a woman from the Netherlands who in the Second World War, she was a Christian, and she and her father and sister were taken to a concentration camp for their anti-Nazi activities. And I'm pretty sure sister and her father died in the camp. She managed to survive. And she then preached for many years about forgiveness and love. And she gave one lecture one night about forgiveness. And at the end, a man came up to her and he had a German accent. And he said, "Do you remember me?" And she vaguely did. And then she realized who it was. And he'd be one of the guards at the camp. And he said, "I gave my life to Jesus Christ. I am so sorry for what I did. Will you forgive me?" And he held out his hand. And she writes, I highly recommend people track this down. She writes about, could I do this? Because initially I thought there's no way I could ever forgive you. I saw what you did and responsible for the death of my loved ones, and she couldn't do it. And then she had to say to herself, am I real? Am I a hypocrite? Do I really believe this? Now, thank God, very few of us would ever face anything like that, and I haven't. But I was in the UK partly because there was a play that opened about Roald Dahl, and John Lithgow played Roald Dahl, and I'm sort of in it. My name is in it, and I'm portrayed. My voice is portrayed on stage. It was an amazing evening. Cool. Got great reviews. It's because of Roald Dahl's anti-Semitism, and I was the journalist who, in 1983, exposed his anti-Semitism. In a phone conversation, he made the most outrageous remarks. I mean, I've written about it extensively, and it's in the book too. And people have said to me, "Did you forgive him?" He never apologized. He doubled down on it. And I have forgiven him because it's for me to forgive. I have not let him take control of that narrative of that conversation. I forgive him. I wouldn't want to, I mean, he's dead now. I wouldn't have wanted to spend any time with him, but I forgave him. And we do have within us the ability the power, and I would say the responsibility to forgive. There are people who suffered terribly. I know that. I would never say to someone who was physically, sexually abused, you've got to go and forgive that person. But I know what it will do to them. I remember my TV show years ago. We interviewed, for years it was on, and we interviewed all sorts of people. And people say to me, what interviews do you really remember? Benjamin Netanyahu, Jerry Adams, people like this. Of course you remember those. But I remember one man whose son was abducted and murdered. Very hard interview to do. I think I was shaking, actually, because you think of your own children. And the man who murdered his son was eventually killed by another prisoner. And I said, how did that make you feel? And he said, oh, I felt nothing. I completely removed that man from my consciousness. It was the only way he could survive, I suppose, but it was an extraordinary answer. Because I thought he'd say, oh, I blessed the day that man had been killed. He said, I didn't feel anything. Part of that was, if not forgiveness, just removing someone who committed evil from your life. Otherwise, in a way, you allow them to re-offend and re-hurt and open wounds. Heaping coals, if you can pay back evil, not always with kindness, that could be impossible, but just removing the person who committed that evil from your life.
Reverend Michael Coren is the author of Heaping Coals, From Media Firebrand to Anglican Priest. It's just out. You can buy it anywhere you buy great books. And of course, you can find the good Reverend online at michaelcoren.com. We'll link to everything in the show notes on the podcast on YouTube. We kept you way longer than we asked for, but we've
It's a pleasure.
Appreciated. This is exactly what this show is for, is just to let the conversation explore issues and open the door for real talk. And we're grateful for it. Thanks for getting us thinking. Congratulations on the book.
Anytime, mate. Anytime.
You got it. That's the Reverend Michael Coren, giving us lots to think about. Thanks to Travis, who reminds everybody watching on YouTube to smash that like button. If you love this on the podcast, it's easy to share as well. You just go, I think on most podcasts, it's bottom right of your screen. Click on the link, and you can share that with somebody who you think might benefit from hearing this. I don't think you have to be a Christian or a person of faith to be interested in conversations around empathy and inclusion and forgiveness and polarization. And it feels like in different ways, these are kind of recurring conversations that we have on the show, just starring different people.
This is the test of life, all the things we try to figure out in life, and then we always come back to the same thing. Everyone just wants love. Everyone wants to feel loved. But then why do we push it away? Why do we fight with people? Why do we, condemn people for their opinions when, the way everything is so divisive these days, we gotta flip it. We gotta go back to where, like the pastor was saying right now, we have to listen to people. I listen to people with different opinions. They're in our chat. They're in our studio. They're in all our feeds. I listen to all those opinions every day, and sometimes they cause me to change mine, and that's why you have to listen. So. Yeah. From starting that conversation out about silencing voices in media, because we need tons of them, to listening to just your fellow man and lending them your ear instead of always I always tell this, I'm not going to say the person I argue with all the time. It's not my wife. It's not my partner, but there's someone I always argue with all the time. And when I watch them, when I'm talking, they're only thinking about the next thing they're going to say. I can see their brain just ticking. I try to do this as well because I have ADHD. Just turn off the part of my brain that wants to rebuttal every time I'm talking to someone and just try and turn on my ears.
Easier said than done.
Just try and listen. And if my brain comes on, it's only me trying to think, why does this person think this way? Do I have something I could tell them to maybe broaden their perspective? Most of the times, they have something to tell me to broaden mine as well. And we just need to do that. We just need to open up our ears a little more these days.
Yeah. I mean,
even PP and JT, they need to do that as well.
Yeah.
Screaming over each other.
I appreciated Sylvia's comment in the super chat when she just said, thanks for your efforts in creating reasonable conversations. I feel like that's kind of what we want to do, reasonable, real life. This is how real people talk to each other. This is how real people that disagree, real people that have issues. That doesn't mean, I know that some people, might sort of perceive that as going soft on issues that require a hard stance. That's not what that is at all. I mean, if somebody needs to be called out, call them out. I think that's important as well. But I do think that, you can be led to believe he had an interesting sort of, he was exploring the idea of like, politicians that are bad people. And I kind of go, well, I mean, what describes someone, what defines somebody that's bad? I mean, if somebody's like, sexually abusing people, yeah, obviously they're bad. If somebody stabs someone in the chest, they're bad. But like if somebody operates in bad faith and to preserve their own political career or to win political favor or to sell memberships, implements a policy that could be harmful to people, is that person bad? Like what's bad and what's not? You can let us know what you think on that to talk at ryanjespersen.com. Obviously, we'll continue these conversations. I wanted to note a couple of political stories that we're following. We talked about the BC election and a great take from Rob Shaw, a political commentator, podcaster from Czech News in BC, who joined us on our episode the 21st of October. BC's wild election. The results are essentially kind of like still up in the air a little bit, but not up in the air. New Brunswick's election results. Last night, Premier Blaine Higgs loses his own riding and loses his bid to remain for a third term the Premier of New Brunswick. His Conservatives, in convincing fashion, losing that election, including as mentioned, Higgs' own riding. Susan Holt, the leader of the Liberals in New Brunswick, becomes that province's first female Premier. So big news out of the province of New Brunswick. We've also, of course, got the Saskatchewan election coming next week. Yeah. So big things happening there.
Things are changing.
Our friend Cheryl Oates out there is quarterbacking that campaign for the Saskatchewan NDP, and of course they have high hopes, maybe a bit of a tougher road to hoe to knock off Brad Wall and his Conservatives, but that's a story we'll keep an eye on as well.
These next few weeks, like if you're not with Real Talk, we got U.S. election coming up. Bill 20's heating up in Edmonton. Like there's just so many things you're going to want to be here with us for.
Yeah, no kidding. Kenzie says, I'm surprised Higgs was popular. Higgs was like, and I'm not drawing a direct line between like this story and the election result, but like people will remember Blaine Higgs was the first, New Brunswick was the first to be talking about parents' rights in education, particular legislating things like, the use of pronouns and parents being notified and those sorts of things. Then Alberta said, hold my beer, and sort of said, we're going to do things with the puberty blockers. And obviously we're going to be talking more about this and all of the other relevant storylines as the fall session kicks off at the Alberta Legislature a week from yesterday. If you're listening to this the day we do it, that'll be the 28th of October. So more of those storylines coming. But yeah, our pal Susan on the soapbox. She's been on the show before. She's a very intelligent blogger, a political commentator, a lawyer out of Calgary. And we'll have to get her back on the show. But I did see a couple of days ago, maybe she was writing this over Thanksgiving, Bill 20, another bill no one asked for. She writes about it at SusanOnTheSoapbox.com. And that's, did I say Brad Wall? Did I just say Brad Wall?
I don't think so. Did you?
I guess I did. Mike, sorry to interrupt my own sentence, mid-sentence, but Mike in the live chat says, did I say Brad Wall? Scott Moe is who I'm talking about. Obviously, if I did say Brad Wall, we
both missed it.
Well, number one, it's because our good buddy Corb Lund was just on the road with Colter Wall, Brad Wall's son. They're both incredible musicians, and I've been listening to their music for like the past 48 hours. Maybe that's why, but my bad. And that's 2 points for you, Mike. 2 points in the chat for calling me out. Obviously, it's Scott Moe. And says, did I say Brad? That's hilarious. Anyway, so Susan's writing about Bill 20. This is something we'll get into more like once the session starts and everything. But for those of you that maybe aren't 100% familiar what it is, this is the bill that is this is the Alberta Infrastructure Accountability Act, and this is the one, of course, that's some of the big storylines here are the formation of municipal political parties in the province of Alberta. That's probably obviously going to have a pretty huge impact on the next municipal election. Those are coming up in about a year in Alberta. And so people are looking in Calgary and Edmonton in particular and early rumblings about who's going to be starting these political parties. I've seen some rumblings with some politicos. I don't want to sort of, betray any trust here, but people are wondering who's going to be out of the gates on the progressive side in the city of Edmonton, right? Because, is Mayor Amarjeet Sohi going to seek re-election? And if so,
I think he is. I mean, I heard him. I won't say the station. I heard him this morning on the radio, and he sounds. He's kind of like Trudeau. He has this confidence that he's going to continue on. But
yeah. I mean, so if he does, then is he going to have? He's not. So he respectfully, I mean, he won an election, good for him, but he's not known as like a formidable organizer, right? He doesn't necessarily have that reputation. So what does the future of progressive partisan municipal politics look like in Edmonton? Is it Amarjeet Sohi around that party? Is it a party that rallies around him? Do resources come in? Does he go it alone? Does he form his own party? If so, what councillors does he take with him? On the conservative side, I don't want to say on the right side, but on the conservative side, you've got that group Tap Yag that came in here, that talked to us with Jeffrey Hansen Carlson. They've got their ward ambassadors or whatever they're calling them, which we assume will be their nominees for council. But you've also got some incumbent councillors. It's obvious that Tim Cartmel wants to be the mayor of Edmonton. And so, what does that sort of party look like? Who does he take with him? Does Sarah Hamilton seek re-election? If so, does she go with them? What other councillors do they take? And what are the sort of big names outside of municipal politics do they maybe attract to draw attention to that party?
Tim Cartmel's already kind of positioning. Like, he's always in opposition to Sohi. Like, anytime you hear a clip of Sohi or an interview, the interviewer always plays Tim Cartmel. He's attacking the website that Sohi just put up. But things are going to get really crazy with this, like, party system that, I mean, it looks like this is going to happen. So, and
it is happening.
I'm reading some of the stuff. Like, I thought it would get shut down in the last minute. No, it's going to happen. But I'm reading some of the stuff about the funding is crazy. Like, if you take a party line, you get more funding. Did you read about that? Like, you can take more funding, and then corporations can now fund.
Well, I mean,
people.
Donations are capped. Like, a lot of donations are capped, and there's like a $5,000 limit. And like, I don't want to get too into the weeds right now.
This
but
was
I'm
just
saying
like yesterday.
It's going to be
some new things.
It's going to be more advantageous. I think if you're seeking election, I have to assume it's going to be more advantageous to align yourself with a party than not. That seems to be obvious. Like, you're going to have the party resources. We talked about this a little bit on our most recent Friday roundtable, our group chat roundtable. Encourage you to check that out. That was a lot of fun. I think that was the 18th of October off the top of my head. But you'll have everything from organizational support, brand support, financial support, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. At the same time, like, I can see why for some people that wouldn't feel like a fit. Like Vamp here. So Vamp says municipal politics will become more openly decided by who funds you and who tells you what to do. That's kind of the thing that's one of the criticisms that people
scary part.
Have around this. A lot of people have appreciated that there's not really been a partisan nature to municipal politics. Now, I will acknowledge
there have to be.
Everybody knows who the lefties are and who the right wingers are.
Of course they do.
But they've not voted. They've not towed a party line every single time. Councillors have been free to vote as they wish. You might call it like it's not a whipped vote because there's no such thing in municipal politics. Well, now there might be. I mean, there will be.
I'm sure there's this low hum of stuff behind the scenes, but I mean, when you're talking about transit or fire or hospital, like, these things, like, they don't have a party line to them, I don't think. So just the whole thing seems ridiculous to me. I'm sure it seems ridiculous to most people, does it not?
Yeah.
I mean, do we have to put colors and flags and team names on us to get better transit in the city of Edmonton? I don't think so.
I mean, a lot of people will talk about securing funding, and obviously that'll be a big part of it. But then the question is, if you're aligned with, like, put it this way, conservative premiers under conservative Prime Minister Stephen Harper didn't exactly, like, kill it. They didn't like just open up the floodgates and see the benefits of being conservatives under a conservative Prime Minister. And so I'm not sure that, like, if you're a conservative mayor, so to speak, or conservative councillors under a conservative provincial government in a situation where there's a pretty strained relationship between the province and municipalities right now over funding, like a very strained relationship. Are you going to fare better off if you're friendlier with the province? Does the province need to sort of at least portray itself as equitable in its funding? I mean, this kind of plays into what we're talking about on our next episode of Real Talk, which I'll mention. I'll draw your attention to the current issue of Alberta Views. It's out on their website right now, albertaviews.ca. Subscribers will already have it at home, and that is a dialogue. I love how Alberta Views does this. They put the yay and the nay against one another. Should the public pay for Calgary's new arena? That's the the question that they've asked. And Deborah Yedlin, who's president and CEO of the Calgary Chamber of Commerce, she's going to be joining us in the next episode. She says, yes, the public should contribute or kick in for Calgary's new arena. Peter Oliver, who's a Project Calgary volunteer and former president of the Beltline Neighborhoods Association, argues no. And so they'll be head-to-head on the next episode of Real Talk, which I'm looking forward to. The Calgary arena funding, people go, well, what's tit for tat now for Edmonton or Edmonton's downtown? People want to see that sort of equitable funding. What does that look like under a party system with municipal governments negotiating with the province that, we assume will still be led, that government, by Danielle Smith a year from now? We'll see what happens at the UCP AGM, which is another story we're keeping an eye on. I'm not sure if you've seen some of this explosive audio that's been released. Purportedly, Matthew Altime, a longtime political organizer. Fun fact for those of you that have listened this deep into the episode on Real Talk, you deserve this little bit of information, this little tidbit. Matthew Altime is who I was referring to when I talked about chimpanzees in former Councillor Mike Nichols' office. It's the comment that got me fired from 630 Ched. So this is who we're talking about, Matthew Altime, on the record, talking about busing in thousands of Muslims to the UCP AGM. We're going to dig into that story more on our Friday roundtable. You can send us your thoughts anytime to talk@ryanjespersen.com. Want to thank, as we wrap today, those of you who not only check out the show on YouTube and on the podcast, but also show us love where we can use it, by liking and sharing our content, by telling your friends, by getting excited about upcoming interviews and letting us know who you'd like to hear on the show. We're doing this for these conversations like the one we had today. Our bucket's full. We hope that yours is as well. As iron sharpens iron, like we said to the good Reverend. Looking forward to the next episode already. We'll talk to you then.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jespersen, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego.